Hi, this is Padma Priya. I am from Avinashalingam Deemed University. So now we can see the transactional analysis. Introduction. Transactional analysis is both a theory of personality and an organized system interactional therapy. It is grounded on the assumption that we make current decisions based on our early experience. Early in life, we may have felt powerless or even experienced ourselves as struggling for survival. Decision made then about how to behave may not be valid, useful or empowering today. The transactional therapist focuses on helping clients rethink these early decisions in light of present circumstances. The transactional analysis emphasizes the cognitive and behavioral aspects of therapeutic proven. Within transactional analysis, there are three recognized schools: classic, Skiffian, redecisional and unofficial schools identified as self-reparenting and corrective parenting. It provides an interactional and contractual approach. It is interactional in that it emphasizes the dynamics of transaction between people, and it is contractual in that remembers develop clear statements of what they will change and how they will be different as a react of being in a group. Now let us learn the objectives of transactional analysis. Define terms specific to transactional analysis, learn and apply principles, strategies of transactional analysis, discuss the goals of transactional analysis, therapeutic approaches, to learn the language and concept underlying the transactional analysis, to analyze our relationship with one another in terms of transactional analysis. The genesis of transactional analysis. Eric Berne, qualified as a psychotherapist, developed transactional analysis theory in 1950. From 1955 to 1962, Berne discovered the ego states, which were the initial stage of development in transactional analysis. This discovery was based on neurological experiments that suggested that different ego states are experienced by persons upon direct stimulations of the brain. Berne recognized the importance of this discovery and identified three distinct ego states. They are parent, adult and child, which constitute a coherent systems of rethinking, feeling and behaving. From 1962 to 1966, Berne centered on the games, which were second stage of the developmental transactional analysis. Berne's curiosity in communication theory led him to understand that there are two types of messages, that is psychosocial, were generated from a single source of communications. As a result, the idea of games discovered a two-level transaction giving rise to expected payoff. The dominant force in our transactional analysis during the third developmental phase was script analysis. The concept of script emerged concurrently with Berne's book on group treatments. Methods for understanding and analyzing scripts were built up and used in the treatment. Thus, transactional analysis began shifted from intellectual approach to proactive approach, which therapists used to change client scripts. In the 1970s, TA gained additional prominence through such popular publications as Born to Win and What Do You Say After You Say Hello, published 2 years after Berne's death in 1970. The fourth influence on transactional analysis was the hybridizations by the Goldings of the transactional analysis and Gestalt into redecision therapy. Redecision therapy ferrets out the affect that links past to the present and allows the client to challenge his or her beliefs about the self in the past. Now we can see about the overview of transactional analysis. Transactional analysis does not try to make the patient better, but to bring him into a position where he can exercise an adult push options to get better. We have observed several identifying characteristics of transactional analysis. Among that, the first one is contractual. Here the therapeutic contracts are working with the client for specified period. The second one, decision making and the responsibility of a therapist could be focused. In the third one, clients can be assisted with their general or personal behavior and feelings to get along with the existing world. Often it is this decision process that is the essence of a TA. In the third analysis, the practitioners share common vocabulary which is well defined and could be understood by the clients with their known language. The knowledge and education of the client is important during the transaction analysis process. The ego states and life scripts concepts of all TA therapists can be approached based on the assumption I am okay, you are okay. The therapeutic principles and theory of personality from transaction analysis are processed by these 4 different methods. The first one is transaction, what people say or do to one another. The second, scripts, endless feedback loops of behavior generated in early childhood and continuing to the present. The third one is games and cons, transactions that are played with others and that led to payoffs. Structures, the differential compositions of ego states specific to each individual. And let us discuss about the key concept of transaction analysis that a therapist will use in their work. A transaction analysis theorist understands personality development in terms of several key concepts: ego states, strokes, injections, decisions, script formation, games, transaction, and life positions. The basic personality premise of a transaction analysis is that all of us are 3 people in one: a child, an adult, and a parent. Child ego state. Every child has their ego states, which consist of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. This constitutes the recordings of child's initial experiences and one's own self-concept. The child ego state can be categorized into 2 practical states. They are the adapted child and the free child. The free child is joyful, curious, playful, and spontaneous, whereas the individual who stay in the stage of free child for a long period may be considered irresponsible or out of control. However, adapted child ego state may be categorized as industrious, compromising, rebellious, and compliant, and they act as if parent or somebody may be observing or listening. Throughout one's life, the child ego state is both an influence and a state of being that is internally derived. It provides the want to of the personality and is the force that motivates the individual. The next is the parent ego state. In terms of functions, the parent ego state may be categorized into critical parent and the nurturing parent. In most cases, someone functioning as a nurturing parent is caring and protective and may sometimes be overprotective. Critical parent is prejudiced, oppressive, controlling, and intimidating. Trusting neither self nor others, the critical parent calls on external authority to enforce his or her demands. In the parent ego state is recorded a model and taught concept of life. This unerasable concept is composed of events that actually happened in childhood. The problem is that the individual internalizes this tape in a distorted fashion, recording both the distorted and the objective realities of what one's parents were. Because the child is dependent on its parents, it is unable to comprehend that they were not God, but human, thus made mistakes. As a result, the child grows to adulthood with a commingled but ultimately right parent ego state that is filled with demands, directions, and dogmatic decisions. The parent ego state then is the externally derived have-to of the personality. Now we can see about the adult ego state. The adult ego state is the umpire between the needs of the child ego state and the stress of the parent ego state. The adult ego state is not only a functioning part of the personality but also an observational state and is internally derived. One of its major functions is to update the parent ego state. Therefore, too much adult results in technically rational, but too little adult results in an illogical and irrational individual. Now we can see about the strokes. In a transaction analysis theory, the need for stroke is considered the basic motivation for any human social interactions and necessary to an individual's healthy functioning. The most positive strokes come from parents who unconditionally accept their child. Though children prefer positive strokes, negative strokes are much considered than no strokes at all. Adulthood is also achieved from spouses, bosses, children, peers, and achievements towards a good job. When straightforward direct strokes are not available, people may opt to play games and rackets to obtain them. Eventually, the stroke one gets or gives reinforce one's life. In summary, the stroke one receives or gives to other reinforces script, life positions, transaction, games, and ego functions. Life positions. Life position is the result of parental treatment during the early days of child and is a major component of an individual's life script. There are 4 basic life positions an individual may adopt. I am okay, you are okay. This is probably the position reflect how the child entered the world as long as the child's emotional and physical needs are met in a loving, accepting way. The infant retains this position and maintains a winner's script. The second one is I am okay, you are not okay. If a child is mistreated, he or she may decide others are not okay, which is essentially a defense against a more basic feelings of being not okay. People in this position often blame or distrust others and react to the world with frustrations or anger. The third one is I am not okay, you are okay. If the child's need are not met, the child may decide that it is his or her fault for being lacking in some fundamental way. This is the most common position and is sometimes called the depressive position. People who are frequently in this position commonly experience guilt, depressions, and inadequacy and fear. The fourth one is I am not okay, you are not okay. If stroking is lacking and extremely negative, the child may decide I am not okay, you are not okay. Since there is no source of positive stroking, the infant may give up and feel hopeless. Persons who adopt these positions are more likely to end up in mental institutions, jail or mall. Next we can see about the script formations. During the early childhood days, individual decision towards a life is scripted in brain, which is unerasable. Scripts have multiple components like parental injunctions, payoffs, life positions, games, and physiological attributes. Parents may send children 2 types of messages that influence the formations of their life positions: permissions and script messages. First, the permission positive strokes give unconditionally or growth promoting messages. In contrast, negative or growth restricting and destructive injunction. After the child incorporates early messages from the parents, a script develops into a strong belief system which is staunchly defended as an adult. Negative long-term global injunctions and attribution do little for the child's physical and mental health. And next we can see about counter scripts. To complicate matters, the nurturing parents also contradictory do messages that may have problematic consequences for the child called a counter script. These parental messages demand acquiescences to the social and cultural expectations of society. The nurturing parents makes a positive verbal demand, be a caring person, which is contradicted by hypocritical actions of the critical parent who says, I won't give money to charity. They are just a bunch of welfare parasites. In other words, do as I say and not as I do. And next we can see about the transaction. The transaction is the fundamental unit of behavior in transactional analysis theory. It is the needed for communications between the child, adult and parent ego states of 2 persons, which determines if the communication stops or continues. It is an exchange of strokes between 2 people, consisting of a response and a stimulus between the ego states. A conversation involves a series of linked to transactions. There are 3 kinds of transaction. They are complementary, cross, and ulterior. In complementary transaction, the reply is between the same ego states. Hence, it is also called as parallel transaction. A crossed transaction happens when there is a crossed communications. The receiver replies to the ego states differently from one to which the communication was aimed at. Whenever a crossed transaction occurs, a breakdown in communications is likely to follow. An ulterior transaction is one that contains 2 levels of communications, a social level and psychological level, and always involves more than 2 ego states. The psychological messages is the ulterior messages. It is aimed at an ego state different from the one the social messages is aimed at. And the next we can see about the games. Games are repetitious, a recurring transaction, superficially reasonable but with a hidden drive. Games may be played at a variety of levels and intensities. Some are socially acceptable, in other feelings are hurt without any permanent damage, and still others are played for keeps. Games are defense mechanism as well as transaction, and everyone plays them 60 to 70% of the time. The general advantage of a game is that it is stabilizing influence. Homeostasis is promoted by the stroking one receives, and psychological stability is reinforced by the confirmations of one's position. Now we can discuss on the rackets. They pay off in which individuals have some favorite negative feeling that they use to confirm their life positions is termed as a racket. This collection of bad feelings is usually learned from a parent figure to whom the child ego state has become accustomed. And next we can see on the drama triangle. Drama triangle is an enclosed system with a precursor, a rescuer, and a victim at its corner. In terms of strokes, the precursor discounts others with negative strokes, the rescuer discounts others with a conditional positive strokes, and the victim discounts him or herself with the negative strokes. An individual may move into a game or racket from any of the three basic positions by exaggerating or de-evaluating the worth of himself or herself or other person. Individuals switch positions as the game or racket progresses. When the other person refuses to continue to play, such individuals switch drama triangle position and play games in order to continue receiving strokes. Ultimately, therapists will use these concepts in transactional analysis therapy to promote structural rearrangement and the deconfusions of a client's child ego state. They will encourage clients to challenge their current beliefs and the way he or she uses their life script. This will help them better understand the directions and patterns of their life for themselves, and this awareness can help them to make the decision to change their behavior. And now we can see on the process of therapy. Settings for transaction analysis range from home-like surroundings to more business-like offices. Since body language clues are important in conducting transaction analysis, in most therapist offices there are no tables or chairs that block therapist and client views of one another. The majority of transaction analysis settings include whiteboards, blackboards, or giant paper pads that both therapists and clients can use to illustrate transactions and games and other relevant matters. Some therapists employ audiovisual aids to provide feedback and heighten clients' awareness. In the initial session, therapists work in a number of ways. Therapists introduce and use a simple common vocabulary. During therapy, there is no gossiping or small talk. Ground rules for a therapeutic contract are agreed, such as no violence or threats of, and no use of alcohols and mind-altering drugs. Furthermore, an initial fee-for-service business contract may be established. Therapists conduct an initial assessment of clients and work with them to establish contract goals, including a time frame for ending therapy. And now we can discuss on therapeutic goals. Transactional analysis seeks to help clients obtain "I am okay, you are okay" position. For clients who have been turned by the life experience from princess to princess into frogs, Bernie saw 4 possible goals. Stewart views these goals as progressive stages in the direction of cure. First one is symptomatic control. Though still feeling distress, clients can control the symptoms in their interactions with others. Symptomatic relief. Getting better or progress, which Bernie regarded as making clients into more comfortable frogs. Transference cure. Here clients can stay out of their scripts so long as they can keep their therapist either literally or mentally around. Autonomy. Casting off the frog skin and taking up once more the interrupted development of the prince or princess. The client adult takes over the role of the therapist as the client attains autonomy. Autonomy refers to the capacity for non-script behavior with no particular time schedule, developed later in life, not under parental influence. The attainment of autonomy involves the persons regaining 3 basic capacities of the fundamental occupations. They are awareness, spontaneity, and intimacy. First one is awareness. Awareness means the capacity to see and hear directly and not in the way in which one was brought. Second, spontaneity. Spontaneity means the capacity to feel directly and to express feelings directly and not in the way in which one was brought up. Intimacy. Intimacy means the capacity to relate to one another and the persons in an aware, spontaneous, loving and game-free way. And the next we can discuss on therapeutic relationships. Transaction analysis provides supportive and nurturing relationship conducive to clients assuming greater personal responsibility for their lives. Transactional analysis, as originally formulated by Byrne, is largely an educational process, and thus the therapist-client relationship resembles a democratic teacher-learner relationship. Early on in therapy, therapists and clients establish ground rules and define the elements of their working and learning content. Therapists train clients in the skills of analyzing ego states, transactions, games, and scripts. Furthermore, therapists encourage and assist clients to identify adult positions for dealing with the people, problem, and situations in their lives. As indicated earlier, more often than not, therapist offices contains educational aids like whiteboards and large writing pads. And now we can discuss on the therapeutic intervention. Byrne regarded transaction analysis as an umbrella term for 4 different but interrelated approaches to treatment. These approaches are structural analysis, transaction analysis, game analysis, and script analysis. There is a progression from structural analysis through transaction and game analysis to script analysis, though he realized that the script analysis state was not always attained. First, we can discuss on the structural analysis. As mentioned earlier, structural analysis consists of diagnosing and separating one feeling, thinking, and behavior pattern or ego state from another. Structural analysis helps clients to identify and become aware of both the existence and contents of their ego states. Its aim is to free people to have appropriate access to all their ego states without debilitating and exclusions and contaminations. And the second one is transaction analysis. The aim of transactional analysis asks social control or ability of the adult to decide when to release the parent or child, when to resume the executive. If a parent does not have social control, others can consciously or unconsciously activate that person's parent or child ego states in ways may not be helpful. Clients are helped to understand the ego state transaction involved in situations and relationships in which they are experiencing difficulty as a means towards greater competence in handling them. The next is game analysis. Game analysis is another way of attaining social control, just as an understanding of structural analysis is a prerequisite of transactional analysis. So, an understanding of analysis of single transaction is a prerequisite of understanding the more complex series of transactions called games. In game analysis, the client is encouraged to learn more satisfying ways of structuring time and occurring strokes. The methods of game analysis include helping a client to see what game he or she is playing, what the movies are, and what the racket or bad feelings payoff are, and how the games justify a life. It is also important to help the client to express constructively the natural child need or feeling which he or she has been discounting. And the last one is script analysis. The script analysis must take care not to behave in ways promote a client's script. The purpose of script analysis is to help clients to get out of the script and thus to behave autonomously. The therapist needs to listen carefully to observe the client's verbal and non-verbal behavior for script signs and signals. Additionally, script analysis may involve the use of a script checklist to help both clients and the analyst to know this client script. Script analysis aims to help clients to abandon their early decisions previously made in different circumstances and with an incomplete neuropsychic or adult apparatus by now making and enacting redecisions for change. Let us summarize on transactional analysis. Hope this module gave an insight into the principles and strategies of transactional analysis, strategies of learning theory, and the applications of these principles and strategies in assisting clients to replace negative behaviors with more acceptable behaviors. Transaction analysis has wide applications in clinical, therapeutic, organizational, and personal development. encompassing communications management, personality and relationships, and behavior. Whether you are in a business, a parent, a social worker, or interested in personal development, Eric Berne's transactional analysis theories and those of his followers will enrich your dealings with people and your understanding of yourself.